Now, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry for that. Problem with the muting. Sorry, everyone. Delay. Let's start right now, really fast. Welcome everyone to 24-hour Pass Summit Preview. We are very excited you could join us today for Robert Cain, Brad Ball, and Jason Strate session, Zero to Hero with PowerShell and SQL Server. This 24-hour Pass event consists of 24 consecutive live webcasts. All sessions will be recorded and posted online soon after the event. My name is Jose Rivera. I am the PASS Global Spanish Virtual Chat Leader, and I only have few interesting slides for you before I hand over the reins to Robert, Bradley, and Jason. They'll speak for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll move on to the Q&A to answer any question you may ask. Just quick information, Jason will be dealing with the questions on Twitter and also during the presentation, so you can make all the questions anytime, any point on the presentation, and we'll deal with that. Next slide. Thank you. If you have any technical issues, write it down on the required assistance or question pane in the right menu of the Go webinar, and we will take care of that as soon as possible. If you want to maximize your screen, you can also use the right pane menu to do that. At the end of the session, there will be a short evaluation. Please give us your feedback. It is really important to us, so please make sure you complete that. Next. I want to thank our event partners. The staging of this event, 24-hour Pass, will not be possible without them. Their support and dedication, and this is the reason this event is completely free of charge. And also, we want to thank our presenting sponsor, Microsoft and Dell Software. Next. As you all know, this 24-hour Pass is a preview of the Pass Summit 2014, largest conference of SQL Server and business intelligence professionals, with over 5,000 attendees representing 2,000 companies from 52 countries. Summit is a great time to share, connect, and learn with your peers and these industry partners. Pass Summit is not only a week of intensive learning and knowledge sharing that will offer strategic insights, it is also a time to network with industry experts. This year event is going to take place in Seattle, Washington from November 4th through 7th, and Pass Summit will feature over 190 world-class sessions over 5 topic tracks. This 24-hour Pass session will be just a mere glimpse of what you can expect from Pass Summit. For more information, please make sure you go to passsummit.com, and if you register by September 26th, we will offer a discount code 24HOP14, and you will get a 200 registration discount. Next. This session presenters are Robert Cain, Brad Ball, and Jason Strate. And really quick, I want to just highlight Robert's. He's a SQL Server MVP, and also is a MCT certified in BI, and is co-author of 4 books. Bradley is also certified in SQL Server 2005-2008, and he's currently working at Thematicwares. The same for Jason and Robert as data platform manager and lead. And Jason is also a SQL Server MVP and solutions architect for Thematics, and one of the few SQL Servers Microsoft Certified Master. Without further ado, it's all yours, Robert.
Thank you very much for the introduction. This is Brad. Can you hear me okay, Robert? Oh, I think you're still muted, Robert.
Yes, it is.
All right. So hopefully everybody can hear me now.
Yep, we can hear you. Hey, real quick, just wanted to point out that Jason Strate is monitoring the questions that you guys have for us, as well as he's checking them out on Twitter. Make sure and use the hashtag #pass24HOP so that way he can catch everything.
All right.
Oh,
Well,
so
why don't we go ahead?
Robert, I have one more favor to ask for you real quick.
Sure. What is it, Brad?
Yeah, so can you teach me PowerShell?
Well, Brad, I mean, the whole point of this is for us to teach. I mean, I thought you were supposed to go read all those books I sent and do all those videos and.
Well, you did those great videos. Sorry, I got a little busy with fantasy football.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess you can just kind of learn along with everybody else here, and maybe ask questions as we go, and we'll just see how far I can take you.
Okay. Well, you know what? That's a great point. Let me go ahead and start that off. So, I mean, since we're on the subject of me asking questions, let's start from the beginning because I really need to know the basics. What are commandlets?
Well, tell you what then. Why don't we jump right into our demos and take a look?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Escape out of this. And here we are inside PowerShell. Now, PowerShell, this is the integrated scripting environment. PowerShell also offers a command line only user interface that you can launch your own scripts or commands through it. Now, a quick note here when you're looking at these scripts, as you know in T-SQL, comments are represented by the double dashes. Well, in PowerShell, comments begin with a little pound sign, or as they call them on the tweeters, hashtags. You can also do the multi-line comments as you see at the top through the less than sign, pound sign, and then a closing pound sign right arrow. All right, so the basic command inside PowerShell is called a cmdlet, cmdlet, and the very first one you should learn is get command. I'm going to execute this commandlet by highlighting it, and then there's this little run button I can hit, or I can just use the F8 key to run the selection. And when I execute this, you can see down here at the bottom, it listed me out tons and tons of different commandlets. As with PowerShell 4, there are over 2,000 commandlets built in for you to use. It can be pretty daunting to learn all these, and you might note that the format of a commandlet takes the verb-noun syntax, such as get, and then the noun, in this case, command.
Okay, so when I want to get a list of something, I literally say get this.
Correct. It's a get, and away you go. Here, for example, I can also pass in what are called parameters. So for this example, I'm told that I want to get a list of the verbs, and I want to get a list of everything that begins with the word get. So there are all the commandlets that are gets. Now, if I want to learn more about a commandlet, there's another commandlet I can use called get help. So if I run get help on get command, you can see down here it lists me out all kinds of interesting help. It tells me what the name of the command is, what it does. It shows me the syntax for it. And then it shows me a much fuller description that it says exactly what it can do.
So this is kind of like using
the
books
first two
online.
commands you should learn. Yeah, essentially it is. It's books online, but it's built right into the command shell. There's also a get help with an online switch that will open up a web browser and take you to the books on what equivalent of books online is for PowerShell. So that's a real nice option if you're on an internet-enabled machine, that you can actually get to the web and see some really nicely formatted commands. There's also a shortcut in case you're lazy, and I know you're a little lazy, Brad, so you can use the dash question mark after a command, and it's the equivalent of doing get help, get command.
Oh, that's nice.
So the next thing we want to look at is how to move around in PowerShell. So the next command we're going to use is get child item. So if I run get child item, you'll see all of the files that are in my user directory. I can use set location to change that to a different place, and that's the equivalent of doing a change directory. So I can go to my projects, or maybe I can go to my PowerShell folder, and if I do another get child item, you'll see all of the files that happen to be in that particular folder.
Now, Robert, when we use T-SQL, I'm able to use where statements sometimes to be able to select particular items. How would I do a where statement using PowerShell?
Well, it's pretty simple. One of the things that makes PowerShell so powerful is the ability to link these different commandlets together as if they were, say, Lego blocks. So I can build a whole chain of commands by passing the output of one commandlet to the input of another. So in this example you're seeing, I'm taking the get child item output, and then I'm using this little pipe symbol right there. And that pipe character says, well, take whatever's coming out of get child item and pipe it into another commandlet called where object. And then in where object, I'm saying, well, for each object going through, I want you to get all the items whose length is greater than 10 kilobytes. And when I run this, you can see I get a much smaller list back, just a handful of items. I can also pass that to another command if I want to sort those. So I'm adding yet a third command in here to sort them. So sort object commandlet, and I'm going to sort on the length property, and now you can see I'm going from the smallest file to the largest file. Now, just like in T-SQL where you can break things up over multiple lines, you can do the same thing in PowerShell when you're using the pipe, as long as the pipe's the last character on the line. So here you're going to see the exact same output with things separated out. You can also do some other things. Here's yet another one we can throw into the mix called format table, which will format things nicely. You can do some interesting things with select object to create new objects. So I can take the get child item objects, and if you see here, I have 4 columns: node, last write time, length, and name. And each one of these is a little object. Well, I can take this and pipe it through select object, and it creates me a new object that only has 2 outputs. It has the name and the length column. All right. One other thing I want to mention, because we will be using this from time to time, in T-SQL, if I want to wrap my lines, a lot of times you can just hit enter and go down to the next line. Well, with PowerShell, you have to use a little line continuation character if you're not ending in a pipe. So if you look down here, there's something that probably looks like a little smudge on your screen, but it's actually what they call the backtick symbol, and it's right up there next to the number 1 on your keyboard. Most people don't really use this all that much, but it's the line continuation character. So here I'm passing in 3 lines to get a forget child item, and I can also combine this with the pipes. And if I have a pipe, you can see here is a backtick, but then I've got a pipe symbol, so I don't need the backtick if I'm using a pipe on the end. Okay. Now, when you download these scripts, and all these scripts that I'm showing here are going to be available. As a matter of fact, if you go to the SQL Pass website, you're going to see that we have the demos are already out here in a zip file, so everything we're showing you now is going to be out there. So Brad, if you need to, you can go download these. I just mentioned that if you want to run a script, you have to use what's called dot syntax, and here are some examples of how you can actually execute a script. Your command might look something like this, and you just type in a period, space, and then the name of the script you want to run. If you just type in the name of the script, it just dumps it to the screen. That's something that always throws people, so I like to mention it.
Nice. So those double quotes are important.
All right.
So, Robert, in T-SQL, I use declare to declare. Oh, sorry about that. We got a little delay.
Go ahead, Brad.
In T-SQL, I use declare to declare create variables. In PowerShell, how would I create a variable?
Well, all variables begin with a $sign, as you can see here, and then you just give the name of the variable and what you want to assign it to. You don't have to worry about declaring it as a specific type. In T-SQL, you have to declare something as an int or an nvarchar or whatever. PowerShell figures it out for you. It's pretty smart. So here I'm assigning the value of hi, and I'm just assigning it the value of hello world. And then if I want to print it out, I just put the variable by itself on the screen. You can see down at the bottom, we print out hello world. Now there's a commandlet called write host, which is actually what's used to display things to the screen. And if I execute write host, it just puts it out there. So PowerShell just says, oh, the variable's there alone, you must want me to put it out to the host. Now, important to understand, if you're a .NET coder, I don't know how many people we have in the audience who have done .NET before, but everything is a .NET data type. So here you can see when I call the getType method off my variable, it comes back and tells me it's a string. But unlike T-SQL, data types are mutable. So if I come down here and I change my high to the number 5 and then I do a getType, you can see now my data type has changed to an int. It is possible to strongly type our variables by using some declarative syntax. Once you strongly type it, you can't go change the data type, it will crash. So if you're still a little uncomfortable with these mutable data types, you can strongly type them using some of the examples I have here. We're going to have to go by some of this code pretty quick, but it is in the downloads and fairly well commented. But it is indeed possible to strongly type things. Comparisons. I know, Brad, you love to compare things like apples and oranges. So comparisons in PowerShell are a little different than T-SQL. Instead of using the traditional equal, less than, whatever, they chose to go with a dash notation. So here, I'm going to assign the value 42 to the $var variable. And then I'm going to use the GT to compare it. So var-GT40 tells me that true, yes indeed, 40 is greater than 42. Excuse me, 42 is greater than 40. I said that backwards. PowerShell knew what I meant. And here we're going to see if the value in var is less than 40, and it's false because 42 is not less than. You can see the full list of comparisons here. We've got equal, not equal, less than, greater than, and this is the thing that catches most people up that are new to PowerShell. And I still, even as long as I've been doing PowerShell, will still make that mistake. I'm wanting to do a comparison to see if something's equal, and I'll still wind up putting the equal sign. So this is going to be, I think, your biggest frustration in learning PowerShell. But if this is your biggest frustration, then you're in pretty good shape. So these are all the different comparison types. Now, calculations work just like they do in any other language. You just use the good old-fashioned plus, minus, asterisk, and slash to do all the different things. So 3 times 11 gives me 33. Also note that PowerShell supports the unary operators, so I can do the plus and get 34. The one thing I want to caution you on is with implicit type conversions. What happens is PowerShell takes whatever is on the right and converts it to the data type of whatever is on the left. So here it's going to take the integer 42, convert it to a string, and compare it to the string 42. And they come out as true. Now the problem you can get into is like this example right here. It's going to take 42, convert it to a string of quote 42 quote, which now won't equal. Okay, but in this one above here, it's taken 42, converts it to an int, which gives just 42, and so now they match. So that's kind of one of the things you have to be careful of. All right.
So just one second, I get a little confused. Also, I get a little confused by this time. In T-SQL, I use single quotes for things, but looking at your PowerShell, it looks like I use single quotes and double quotes.
Yes. So with PowerShell, you can use either double quotes or single quotes. So you can see here's 2 examples, and you can actually mix them up. And if I do something like embed double quotes inside single quotes, it will actually display the double quoted text for me. Or likewise, here I've got a single quote in the word can't, and so now it displays that correctly. Just like in T-SQL, if you want to embed that quote inside quotes of the same type, you just double them up. So here you can see I said double quote hello world, and I get single quote hello world in the output. It also supports some cool, what we call escape sequences that use the backtick. So, you know, in T-SQL you have to use CHR10, CHR13 for the line feed carriage return. Well, there's just a simple backtick N is the new line, backtick R is carriage return. It also supports tabs with a backtick T. Now, here is something really, really cool that's going to help us out later when we start dealing with some SQL. Here strings. A here string is a way that you can have the same string go over multiple lines. You know, in T-SQL you have to use, you know, my string equals quote, some text, quote, plus, you know, more text, plus more text on each individual line. Here, you can just start a here string by putting an @ sign, and then whichever quote mark you want. It works both single quotes and double quotes. And that has to be the last thing on the line. And then you can come put some text in. And I tell you, this is really great when you're working with T-SQL because you can just take that SQL query that you mastered in Management Studio, cut and paste it, and boom, you're done. You've got a string with your SQL command in it. Very, very nice. Now, to close out your here string, the very first character on the line must be either the double quote or the single quote mark and the @ sign. So if you indented any, it won't work. So here you can see we get some text, and then in this next section you can see we can also use this with single quotes. Now, the one thing that comes a difference with single quote versus double quote is called string interpolation. And this gives PowerShell some really good power when you're working with strings. Here, let me show you. I'm going to put two variables, and in one of the variables, I'm going to get the number of child items I have in my C:PS folder, and then in the $loc variable, I'm going to get the current location of where I'm at now, which is going to be C:PS. So here you can see I have a string. Inside that string, I've embedded my two variables. When I run this, you can see string interpolation has actually taken those variables and converted them to their values before it input them into the string. So you can see I got 55 items in that folder. Now, if I actually wanted to actually display that variable, I would have to use a backtick in front of the $sign to actually display it correctly. Now, with single quotes do not perform string interpolation. So that's the big difference. If you want string interpolation, you have to use double quotes. Otherwise, you use single quotes. By the way, string interpolation also works with here strings. Here is a here string where I just took that same output and put it in a little table. Just going to quickly go through. There's examples in here where you can use expressions in strings. If you're familiar with some of the C# formatting, you can do some really powerful formatting, and you can see on the left is the way we use the squiggly brace. 0 represents the first item, colon, and then the format. And so you can see all kinds of examples down here of what the values are going to be. So play with this, and you can actually see these come out. Unfortunately, we have a very short time. If you want to see me go more in depth on this, you can come to our pre-con at the summit.
So
go on down here.
I've heard that
you got a question?
We've got some more powerful. Yeah, we've got some more powerful things. We've got arrays and hash tables, and I've heard of these, but I'm trying to figure out how I would use them, how they reflect what I do in T-SQL. Are they similar to temp tables in PowerShell?
An array can be, yeah. That's a pretty good analogy. An array would be a temp table with like one column in it, and you would address it using the row number. So here I'm going to create got a page down, and here you can see I'm going to create a simple array, and I've loaded the array up with my blog, Arcane, and code, so I got 2 items in the array. And when I get position 0, it lists it out here. Position 1 is code. And if I just use the $sign array, it lists out every single item. If I actually want to overwrite the array, I can come down here and just overwrite it, and then I get my my new values. I can also assign them using the position, so array bracket 0 is going to overwrite the first value, so you can see power Cain, and then we'll do replace the next item. Remember, you guys are computer geeks, you know every numbering starts with 0. So here we have replaced both of those. Now there is, you know, a minute ago I did a little shortcut in just saying equals and then item, comma, item, comma, item. But there is a formal array creation syntax, and that is to use an @ sign and then put what you want in parentheses. And the only reason I mention that is sometimes you want to create an empty array and then add things to that array. So the only way to do that is using $array equals @ and then empty parens. Okay. Let's see. There's also, you can check to see if things are in an array. I'm going to load up the array with just 3 numbers, 142 and 256. And you can use contains and not contains to see if those items are in there. Now, a hash table is, you know, it's not a diced up potato that you eat at the breakfast table. It's actually kind of like an array, but instead of using numbers to figure out where an item in the array is stored, you use a string as the key. And we've probably all worked with these at one point or another. Think of the left column, key, PowerShell, arcane code, as a primary key in a table, and then the right side of those equal signs would be the first column of text that you're referencing. So if I load these up, if I just want to display all the values, I can just say $hash, and you can see it nicely lays these out, name and value. If I want to get the value, I just, in the square brackets, I just put the key, and it returns me the value. So PowerShell returns PowerShell.column. I can also, instead of using brackets, I can use period, and then the value I want here, arcane code, returns the arcanecode.com blog. And I can do all kinds of things like using variables and placing my keys. I can add and remove values. For example, here I'm going to add the SQL Pass website. I've just added it. And now I can use the remove. And so now I'm gone. There's PowerShell key in the SQL Pass. And I can check to see, yep, there's SQL Pass, true, it's there. I can use contains to see if that key is there. Nope, it's gone. And there's also a property called contains value that you can use to see if that particular value is in the hash table. Finally, I can also just list the keys or just list the values. All right. So moving right along, there are a few built-in variables that you can use. I'll just quickly go through these. You've got false, true, null. And these can be all used for comparison purposes. So is something false? Is something true? You can also get working directory, home directory. We'll see that my working directory is C:PS. I can also find out some information about my user machine. And you can see it kind of gives a dump about all kinds of info. I'm in the PowerShell host and so forth. So lots of different information I can get. All right, so Brad, you know, on this next section, you've written T-SQL before, right? I mean, you've done some like programming, and you know all about ifs and else ifs.
Absolutely, yeah. We know if statements. We know else if.
All right. Well, then we'll just kind of blow through this section real quick. I think everybody here probably has, and it supports all the standard constructs, and you can look at these later. You know, we've got if else, so that's supported, and it's just a matter of putting what's going to equate to a true-false expression. So whatever you put in parentheses has to evaluate to something true or false. So here, does the var equal 1, true or false? Well, 2 does not equal 1, so we would fall through to the else. It also supports if, else, if. It also has the switch statement. The switch statement is similar to the case statement. So just like we've got a case in T-SQL, we have switch here. There's some more on switch. And then we also support all the standard looping types. You know, we've got the while loop, which evaluates the condition and then sees if it should do something. We've got a do while loop, and the do while, of course, it checks the condition at the end, so you're guaranteed that loop's going to run at least once. We also have, if you want to do things in a more positive light, there's also do until. So you could either do while something is true, or you can do until something is true. Then there's the good old-fashioned counter where we can go, you know, start at 0, do while it's less than 5, and then each time through add 1 to it. If you're a C++, C# kind of guy, this syntax is pretty straightforward. You can also iterate over arrays. Probably the most common thing you're going to do is the for each. By far, that is the looping construct I use the most. And here you can see what it's doing is I've loaded up a little array with some numbers, and I said, well, for each number in that array, I want you to display it on the screen. Basically, it goes and does whatever is in here. So lots of cool things I can do with this. If I need to break out, I can break out of the loop, and there's lots of other things I can do. In the interest of time, we're going to just kind of jump down here and get down
Robert,
here to the section on script blocks.
So I notice all these squiggly brackets all over the place. Can you explain to me what those are? When am I going to use those in PowerShell?
You know, in T-SQL, when you want to create a little block, you've got the begin and the end. Well, just think of this opening squiggly braces as a begin and the closing squiggly braces as an end. So you've got a begin-end block that follows some command. Now, with PowerShell, it's pretty cool because you can actually just have a little script block exist all on its own. And if you want to execute that script block, you just use an ampersand and then put whatever's in the script block. So here we can say, ooh, PowerShell is cool. Yes, yes it is. I can also assign a script block to a variable, but if I just display the variable, it just displays what's in the script block. If I actually want to run it, I just have to use an ampersand in front of it. So you can do some interesting things with that, but you most often use them down here.
So now, I guess that brings me to another question. So you've talked about what the equivalent of the begin and end are. If I want to write a stored procedure essentially in PowerShell, how would I do that? Well,
in PowerShell, we refer to either stored procedures or a function as a function. So here I have a function. You just use the word function, and then you declare the name of your function. Now, in PowerShell, when you write your own function, it's a best practice to use the same format as commandlets, so a verb noun. So I'm going to write hello world. So I'm going to go run this. I don't see hello world out there. Well, that's because all I've done is put the function in memory. Now I actually need to go execute it. And I'll execute it by going write hello world, and sure enough, now my screen clears and I get hello world. I can also pass in parameters just like I can in T-SQL. I can pass parameters in. So here I've created a little function where I'm passing in a first name and a last name, and I can call it by just saying get full name, and then I just put a list of the parameters in the order they come in. I don't have to use commas or anything like that. And there's my full name. Now I want to mention one thing. It is possible to alter the value of a variable while you're in the particular function. For example, now in this function, I'm just going to run this to get the function in memory. And so here I'm going to set a variable called myParam. I'm going to set it to the value of 42. And we can see prior to the function is 42. Inside the function, I changed the value of the variable to 33. And so sure enough, it changes here, but when I come back out, it is still 42. But if I put the little word ref in front of it, I now have the ability to alter that value. So here I'm going to compile the function, and then we'll come down here, and you're going to see that after the function, it's, well, I messed up some syntax there, but after the function, it's now altered to the value of 33. Now, this is a horrible practice. It's kind of akin to your neighbor comes over to the house and says, hey, can you watch my cat for a little while? Brad likes cats, what can I say? So now, think of that cat as the value you're passing in. When I gave Brad the cat, I really didn't expect Brad to do anything with it. I just expected him to give me the cat back like he was. But pretend like Brad goes out and shaves my cat for whatever reason. I really didn't expect him to alter the cat. I just wanted it back. Well, that's kind of the same effect that would have here. Your most PowerShell programmers do not expect their parameters to be altered. So basically, what I just showed you, don't do. Now, you can also return values from functions just like you can in T-SQL with a T-SQL function. So here, I'm passing in two values, and I'm using the return command to return something back. So here I'm going to put it in memory, and I'm going to call the function get a value and pass 33 and 42 in there. And you can see down at the bottom, it's output the number 1386. Okay, that is what's come back from our function. I can also store this in a variable by just saying variable name equals my function, and you can see return value is 1386. Functions also support name parameters. So here you can see instead of doing things by their position, I can actually give it the name of the parameter. So here, -1, 33, -2, 42. And now, once you start using name parameters, the order of these is no longer important. For example, in the second hand here, I can come down here and say, get a value. And then I can swap them, 2, 42, 133. I get the same value back. Now, I talked earlier about how cool PowerShell is and how it gets its power from what's called pipelining. Well, what pipelining does is, lets you pass in commands from something else. Think of that as like opening up the lid and dumping in stuff in a bucket. So here, we're going to pipeline enable our functions. To do so, once we declare the function, we have to declare 3 keywords. First is begin. And in the begin block, it's going to run this once before it does anything else. So in this begin block, you can see I've got a little script block, and in it I'm starting a variable called retval, short for return value, and here are some PowerShell files. Then I have my process block. This process block is going to execute once for every item coming in the pipeline. And here I'm just saying, well, if the name of that file object getting passed in is like PS1, then add it to the return value. And then finally, the end statement occurs after I'm done processing everything. And so here I'm just going to return what was in that value. So we'll come back up here and quickly run this. And you can see, sure enough, there's all my files, and it's only limited it to PS1. So get child item, passed its stuff into your function, and that's how you can pipeline enable your own functions. So let me jump down here. Now, guys,
so
just
Robert,
between you and me, Brad's kind of clumsy.
I am very clumsy, and
so
I
this
should
this next section applies for him.
So Robert, I wanted to ask, in SQL Server, when I write T-SQL, I can use raise air, I can use throw and try catch. What should I do in PowerShell if I'm writing something and I want to make sure I've got error handling?
Well, it's actually pretty similar to what you've done in T-SQL. It uses try catch. So here you can see I've got a little simple function, but if I try to run this with a 0, it's going to get a divide by 0 error. So what we want to do is use the try-catch syntax. And we simply use try and then the code we want to try. And then we use the catch and we put our error code in the little script block by catch. And then finally will occur whether or not you had an error. So it'll come back and say, well, we're done. So pretty simple to create, just try catch finally. All right. Let me jump over now to talking about SQL Server because we're getting really short on time here, and I want to make sure to at least hit this. In your samples, you have something called the C2H SQL file, and this is going to be working with the SQL Provider. SQL Provider is a module that you can run that'll add ability to interrogate SQL. Now, I've got demo code in here that will actually go interrogate SQL to see if it's there, and we'll get a list of modules that are available to load. Now, I've already loaded mine, which we do right down here, and you can see this is pretty straightforward, but there's an import module command, and I have figured out whether I want to load SQL 2012 or SQL 2014. If you've only got one version of SQL Server on your box, you don't have to go through this. And if, for those of you who are still in 2008 R2, I've got another demo up here for loading the provider for 2008 R2.
Now, Robert,
so I've already imported this module.
I'm a simple guy. You're importing a module. That sounds very important. I want to use PowerShell against SQL Server. What am I getting from this import module?
Well, once you import the module, what happens is it's kind of like adding a new library to or a brand new set of commands to your environment that you can run. And I can actually come down here, and when I run git command, and I tell it I want you to get all the commands in the SQL PS module, you can see down here I get a list of all of the different commands that are available to me. There's things like backup SQL database, decode SQL name. One of the biggest is invoke SQL command. And you can see I can do all kinds of things with this. So now, once I've imported this SQL PS module, I've got a whole bunch of new commands that I can use in PowerShell. One of the big things I want to be able to do is kind of navigate around. So I can actually set my location to SQL Server //, and I can actually navigate my SQL Server as if I was navigating the folders on my hard drive. At the root, you can see I've got SQL, which is the SQL Server. I've got my policies. I've got my integration server and analysis services server. If I jump down here to my SQL Server, you can see there's the machine I'm running on. And if I jump down to that machine, you can see all the instances. And you can see I've got 3 instances on here. I've got a default instance, which happens to be 2012. I've got a 2008 R2 and a 2014 instance. Now, if I jump down here to the default, you're going to see all the same objects you'd see on a SQL Server. You've got your databases, your job server, your logins, your mail, the kind of stuff you'd see at the top level of SQL Server Management Studio.
So, Robert, this is amazing. So literally I can use the exact same commands that we covered earlier to be able to navigate my SQL Server just like it's a folder to find out information.
Correct. You can see here I've moved down. Now, it's also, the provider's very variable friendly, so you can see I've put my machine name in a variable, and I stuck that in an instance name. And then down here I said, well, set location to the databases on that instance. And you can see here's all the databases I have on my current instance. Okay? So a quick note, by default, your system databases are hidden. If you want to see them, you have to use the -4 switch. Now you can see there's tempDB and MasterDB and whatnot are in there. So I can navigate this. I can go all the way up and down. Let me just jump you down here to the columns. Here you can see all of the columns that are part of my sales LT product table. So I can actually go all the way down to columns. I can interrogate properties. And I can do all kinds of cool things. Now, see, we got about 3 minutes left, so let me just quickly mention some of the things we can do here. We can actually do complete database backups. And again, all this code's out there for you to play with. But here's, I can do database backups. I can go review my error logs, and I can actually cull through those error logs very easily looking for maybe backup errors is what I do with this example. I can also go review the status of my SQL agent jobs. So here you can see there's where I'm going through and I'm looking for different categories, looking for errors that might have occurred with my job agents. So lots of things I can do there around managing my SQL Server. And I can do this if I've got 500 SQL servers on my enterprise. I can roll through all 500 and query all of these simultaneously. But as they say on TV, wait, there's more, because I can also do a lot of common development tasks. So if you're both a DBA who does management and a DBA who does development, you can still leverage PowerShell. Here you can see I've got basically you create a command, put it in a variable, and remember I was talking about how cool here strings were. So here is my here string, and then here is just a SQL command to go create a database. And all I had to do was cut and paste it in here, none of these line continuation stuff. And then I use a basic command called invoke SQL command. I tell it the query I want to do, and then the server instance I'm going to. And so through this, I can actually go out and execute all kinds of code. I can actually create tables, and there's examples in here, which unfortunately we're out of time, but there's all kinds of good examples in here that you can take back and you can look at to see how all this stuff works. And you can see in these demos I go all the way through getting data back, working with it. I want to mention one more thing before I turn it back over to the Q&A session. In this file, which we're not going to have time to go into, I also have examples on working with the SQL Management Objects, and I do some of the same things we do in the Provider. In our pre-con, you will see much more in-depth on all of these subjects. You'll see how to work with the SQL Management Object Library, as well as more on the SQL Provider. We'll also be covering some more management techniques beyond the simple ones I mentioned here. And we're also going to be getting into talking about things like using PowerShell with SQL Azure. So lots of good stuff that's going to be coming up in our pre-con. Let me, again, the slides and the demos are already here on the website. I know it's unusual. Speaker already has his demos up beforehand, but hey, you know, Brad made me. He threatened to shave my cat if I didn't get these up here. So
I won't give it back unless you did.
Back over. So if you liked what you heard, you can get some cool discounts. Let me go ahead and bring this back up to the full screen. And we'll open it back up to our moderator for some questions. I do want to thank Jason for his hard work in answering questions. And just to make it clear, Brad has been a great sport playing along. Thank you, Brad. He actually does know quite a bit about PowerShell. So, you know, just want to make it clear that he is one of our experts. So thanks, Brad.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Jose, can you?
Yeah, I have a question from David Clary at the very beginning, and here it is. Well, when I run get help, get command, the result does not include the description. Is there any way to toggle verbose mode or on results?
Yes, there is a -full switch. If you use get help space -full, it should display everything that has anything to do, all the examples, all of that. And again, I list out all those commands in the files that you can go download.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the questions were answered, Robert, so let me throw one out to you real quick. Just theoretically, and I'm assuming this is something we're going to be covering in our pre-con, not like I know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But how can I use PowerShell to automate some of my development work?
Well, in the examples that we were looking at, one of the things you could do, and we're going to be doing a demo of this, is you can read from, say, a source system. You know, I'm a business intelligence developer and consultant, and a lot of times we have to set up a staging copy of some source system. So you can actually take code, point it at a source server, and say, I want you to go through, and I want you to look at every single table, and I want you to look at every single column in every single table, and I want you to get its name, I want you to get its data type, its size, and then I want you to turn around, and I want you to recreate that on my target server. And even more, I want you to go add some additional columns. I want you to filter out columns, names that don't, maybe, I don't really care about these binary, var binary max columns. So I want you to filter those out. And then, boom, you can actually go recreate all of that on a new machine. We did some experiments, and, in a very short amount of time, I think it was like, 5 minutes or something, we had gone through and created something on the order of 2,500 tables with just a little bit of code. So lots of cool things like that you'll be able to see.
And Robert, this is Jason. Got a few questions at the end that I didn't answer. I just left them open so that we could give you a chance to answer these ones. Can we automate the service pack upgrade using PowerShell?
Yes, it's you don't do it through the SQL Provider. It's basically calling the same kind of command line syntax you would do if you were running it from like the DOS shell.
All right. And what kind of security is involved when using PowerShell to run SQL commands?
It uses the security of the ID. Basically, whoever is running the PowerShell script is whose security gets passed on to the target server. There is a way, though, that you can pass credentials in. I didn't have a demo of it in here, but there is a way that you can then pass in credentials to all these commands I've been showing and have it execute that way.
All right. And have the error codes been fixed with the invoke SQL command?
Not to my knowledge, but they could have, and I'm just not aware of it. That's something we'll have to follow up on.
All right. And there was a question out there about where to get the session information. I did put that into chat and replied all so that everyone can see where that's located.
Good.
Robert, another one for you here. Does PowerShell integrate with TFS builds for database projects?
It's not something I've tried. I have used the TFS build process, but not with database projects, but I've not tried injecting PowerShell. That sounds like a good challenge between now and the summit.
All right, and most scripts from the community use SMO. What benefits of using SMO over SQL PowerShell over SQL PSX? SQL PSX is a community organized project that existed prior to the provider coming out, and it was designed to make the SQL Management Object library much easier to use. SQL PSX was a wrapper around SMO. SQL Management Objects are the set of Microsoft.NET DLLs that Microsoft uses to talk to SQL Server. So you can leverage these too, but if you're not a .NET person, they can be a little hard to work with. So as a result, they came out with the SQL Provider to make things for your, a lot of DBAs, very smart people, they're just not .NET developers. So they wanted to provide a mechanism that was easy for people to use and navigate. Major differences between the three, the provider and SMO are both supported by Microsoft. So you know that there's going to be, if there's bug fixes or as you go from version to version, they're going to be kept up to date. The provider is easier to use, but it can be a little slower compared to going directly against the SMO because, let's face it, the provider itself is a wrapper around the SMO libraries. So if you really want the highest, fastest performance, you have to go down to the SMO level. All right. And so I think we've got time for one more question. There's a few more that are out there, but I'm going to go with this one. Is this something that we could use to run backups for all DB servers from one server?
Yes. You'll have to turn on what's called SQL remoting and then provide the correct permissions. That falls under, if you want to learn more about that, just go look up security on PowerShell and you'll learn about the basics of implementing security. But once you do that, then yes, you can just kick it off from one machine, go out to all of your machines, query them, find out all kinds of information like we showed, get backups, query their logs, the whole 9 yards.
All right, Jose, we'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Jason. So, you like what you heard? Robert Bradley and Jason will be presenting this full pre-con session at Summit. So make sure you go to the Fast Summit website, fastsummit.com, and register for the event. And make sure you take the discount code using the 24HOP14 discount code. Next slide.
There we go.
Next slide.
Hopefully everybody's caught up.
Coming up next is Peter Myers with Past to Future. So it's always forecasting with Microsoft BI. That will be in a couple of minutes, about 4 minutes. So stay tuned for our next session, and thank you for coming.
Peter's a great guy, so you're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, have fun and best of luck.